Is this for real?
Those are the blueprints for...
Mole. Oh, shut up! Mole, 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 mole.
This video is going to act as somewhat of a part 2 to my original Pluton video, because there is so much new evidence that proves my theory even further. But this video will stand on its own pretty well, so I would just check this one out after this to get even a little more context. But if you did see the first one, you'd probably remember how I thought Pluton could be a mole or maybe a mole-like ship. And since that video has dropped, the mole gang has grown substantially, and I even somehow managed to cross 1,000 subscribers in the process. And with the recent chapters and some of the new information given to me by my mole confidants, I think we have all but sealed the deal on what Pluton really is. And before we go any further, I ask that you please seal the deal on subscribing to my channel. I never thought we'd even get to 1,000 subs, so I'm just gonna up the new goal all the way to 5,000 so it doesn't get crushed right away just like the last one. But almost 96% of you who watch my videos anyway have yet to subscribe. If only 6% of you who watch but haven't subscribed yet decided to finally just click that button down below, then we'd hit 5,000 subs overnight. So you know what to do. But on to the theory.
Yeah.
In my first video on Pluton, I talk about how it can almost assuredly dig underground, and I'm gonna quickly speed run the major points of that one just to give some highlights for the context of this video, but I won't cover every point, so make sure to check it out after this video is over. But the first piece of evidence that tells us it may be able to dig is that Pluton is known as the god of the underworld, so it almost assuredly has something to do with underground activities. And there is a little known mole called the Boss of the Earth, or the Dirt Boss for short, that dug Gidatsu under the sea from a random water spring island all the way to Alabasta, where the tunnel is now used by tourists. And perhaps the way Pluton destroys islands is by digging holes that cause volcanic activity, just like we saw at the end of Wano.
Krakatawa!
And we know new islands are made from underwater volcanoes thanks to Nami, so maybe Pluton can even create islands using the same mechanism. So basically, I theorize that Pluton is a mole, or at least partially a mole, such as a mole-ship hybrid like Laboon, or maybe even a devil fruit is involved, like a mythical version of Miss Merry Christmas's fruit. And since that video dropped, so many people have hopped on the mole gang bandwagon, and now we even have Parvision allied with us, and tons of people from his Discord have helped strengthen the mole agenda even further. So I'll be shouting out some of these people throughout the video, and make sure to go check out Parvision's Discord as well. So anyway, I released my first Pluton video after chapter 1054, and back then I, like many, made the assumption that Pluton was buried under Wano, but in 1055 we had that confirmed. And Sukiyaki also mentioned that Pluton was sleeping beneath their location, or at rest in the official, both of which at least slightly imply that Pluton is alive. While sleeping pushes that agenda even more, I think it's fair to say that at the bare minimum, both words at least hint that Pluton could be a living thing. And to add on to this, we had an interesting comment from Frankie in chapter 1056. When it was revealed that Pluton is in Wano, he said, "I can't believe that thing actually exists." So maybe I'm reading too much into this, but thing makes it seem like some kind of abomination. And Frankie knows what Pluton looks like better than anyone, and if we also add the recent context that it could be alive, I think that this could also be another hint. I mean, a modified mole or maybe a ship with a mythical mole fruit would probably qualify as an abomination. And shout out to Parvision for reminding me of when Frankie and Iceberg first saw the blueprints, because Tom called Pluton the nastiest monster in the history of shipmaking, and Frankie asked if humans can even build it. If it was simply a mechanical ship like we have seen in the story or maybe even in real life, I personally doubt that they would talk about it this way. And perhaps the best piece of evidence was sent to me on Discord by Q, and it was about the port deep beneath Wano called Mogura Port. And for those who don't know, Mogura in Japanese means mole. This port was mentioned earlier in the arc as a means for easy entry into Wano. The port existed as a way to go under the walls and have your ship pulled up to the surface of Wano by using some kind of pulley system so that entry was easier and safer. And we saw this with Apu, and that's how he got back in the country. And that means that this port essentially exists in old Wano so that you can pull things up to new Wano. And it is situated directly above where Pluton is today. And it's called the Mole Port.
Love this beat.
Kick that music, please.
I mean, you really couldn't script it any better. And since the mole port is all the way down in Old Wano, and every other port that we have heard of was in New Wano, I think that this one is worth digging deeper into. Because now that we have the context of Old Wano being submerged and New Wano existing high up above the walls, I think it's obvious why and even when the mole port was established. If we look at chapter 1055, Sukiyaki explains to us how the walls in Wano work. And I think it's safe to say that the walls were put up sometime near the Void Century, and presumably they exist to keep Pluton anchored or caged, which we'll discuss in more detail later. But once the walls were erected, then the people of Wano started building the settlement up above that is the new Wano we know today. They had to build that settlement because otherwise they would get flooded out, so that means the mole port was likely established very soon after Pluton was put there, and the walls were erected because otherwise the water would begin accumulating as soon as that happened. They needed to use this port as a means to take building materials, ships, people, livestock, etc. up to the top, and they would have needed to start that right away because water would have started accumulating on day one. So the people who built the mole port were probably alive when Pluton was placed underground, directly beneath where the port exists. And I bet leadership of Wano at the time knew what Pluton looked like, or at least heard from a credible source like Joy Boy himself, and that may have played a part in the name of the port that would have helped them move up to New Wano. I mean, the people of Old Wano basically woke up one day and had these massive walls placed around their country that blocked them off from the world. So I think it makes a ton of sense to name that port after the creature that is A, directly beneath them, and B, responsible for them building the port and moving up to New Wano in the first place. And the people of Old Wano may not be the only ones who built something with a mole reference, because the Rocket Man is oddly mole-shaped, and it was built by Tom, who also saw the blueprints. And I was actually told I'd get a dislike if I didn't give credit to Keb for this info, so please make sure to drop a like and help me with the algorithm just in case they go through with it anyway. But I want to make one thing clear about the blueprints. They were for the counter to Pluton, not Pluton itself. Frankie made that clear, and that's why he decided to burn them after knowing Robin wasn't going to use Pluton for evil. However, I am sure the blueprints gave a hint or even a straight up illustration to what Pluton actually is. It may be a stretch, but the structure of the front of the Rocket Man is similar to that of the moles that we have seen in One Piece. Both Miss Merry Christmas and the Dirt Boss both had long noses just like the Rocket Man, and I'm pretty sure that these things are even nostrils, and it even has a face towards the back. Perhaps the Rocket Man and the Sea Train were inspired by Pluton, which was able to do something similar but by digging underground to enable faster travel for people, similar to the one we saw from the Dirt Boss. And if you're still doubting whether Pluton can even be a living thing because of how often it's been called a battleship, keep in mind that San Juan Wolf is literally known as the Colossal Battleship. He was already huge, but now he has a devil fruit that makes him even bigger, so maybe Pluton also has a fruit that enables it to be a ship and a mole at the very same time. And here's something else to think about. The amount of fresh water around Wano has to be extremely heavy. And if Pluton were to move somehow, there would be a huge open crater directly beneath Old Wano and the fresh water. And yes, as we understand it now, the walls may need to be destroyed by Zunisha in order for Pluton to move, but I think Oda could easily subvert our expectations and have Pluton be removed another way. For example, we know Caribou is going to leak Pluton's location to someone that we don't know about just yet, which I think it's Crocodile, but even Caribou himself could just swallow Pluton up with his swamp fruit and take it somewhere else. Blackbeard may also be able to do this, so my point is that there are probably other ways to remove Pluton without destroying the walls. So if Pluton were to be removed somehow, there would be a huge gap under Old Wano, and I think there's a good shot that the fresh water simply falls in and sinks Old Wano due to the weight. And I also mentioned in my last Pluton video how it would make a lot of sense for Pluton to have dug from Alabasta in the past, where the Pluton poneglyph was and Crocodile assumed Pluton was, to Wano, where it could then be kept for safekeeping. They could have picked Wano for several reasons, but whatever it was, it seemed Pluton was anchored or caged caged under Wano. One guess for this is that Pluton is devil fruit related, and we know that sea stone is made in Wano, so perhaps Pluton is at least partially encased in sea stone to keep it from moving, and that's why Wano was required to cage or anchor it, and maybe this could also explain some of what the blueprints for Pluton's counter told Frankie. And if it really did dig to Wano from Alabasta in the past, which is a big if for sure, this part is a little tinfoily, then maybe that water could come crashing down the tunnel and make its way back to Alabasta. I mean, obviously Alabasta is a desert that could use an influx of water, fresh water specifically, and the structure of Alubarna even alludes to the fact that water once covered the island. Shout out once again to my mole deputy for shouting this out. Isn't it odd that Alubarna is situated so much higher than the rest of Alabasta? It's not like they have floods to worry about, or did they? So maybe Alubarna, which was built even before the Void Century, was built up high to be above the water that Alabasta actually had at some point. And so this makes me wonder where all that water went. Well, if Pluton actually left Alabasta as I mentioned, then maybe all that fresh water just fell straight through the tunnel with it, all the way back to Wano. So now when Pluton is freed, perhaps that fresh water is returned all the way to Alabasta so that the people can have a better source of fresh water, be able to grow more crops, develop canals for faster travel, etc. And maybe it seems crazy to think that something so insane could happen with the fresh water, but Oda seems to have really focused on the fact that this is fresh water, not seawater. And if the walls just break, then that fresh water is just going to simply fall into the seawater and it's just not going to be able to do anything. So I feel like this is kind of a plot device that Oda has set up that's going to mean a lot more than simply preserving old Wano beneath it. And one last kind of tinfoily idea that I want to throw out there is about the Kozuki clan crest. And thanks to N for bringing this up. While it obviously looks somewhat like a Jolly Roger, most people have assumed that was just a bird in the middle. But what if this was actually a symbol to hide the 3 ancient weapons? Much like how the scabbards use different creatures to send hidden messages to people throughout most of Act 1 and 2 in Wano. And of course, Kinemon famously messed up the last one, but that led to confusing Orochi and then Dendro coming out and explaining it. I mean, the Kozuki clan very clearly has close ties to the Minks and the Ancient Kingdom and Joy Boy himself, so it's not out of the realm of possibility for them to design their crest with the dawn in mind. I mean, the very middle is clearly a duck or a swan head or something, and I think that could be emulating Uranus, which we know is the god of the sky, and many people believe hatched from the egg on Roger's ship. And then Poseidon could be emulated by the fish tails that represent the crossbones, basically representing the various sea kings that Poseidon controls. And then what about Pluton? Well, that is hidden right here in what looks like the bird wings. Those could just be mole claws. While it looks like a stylistic choice for the bird wings, I think those could also easily be viewed as 2 mole claws thanks to the long separate individual claws like moles in One Piece have. And then of course we have the sun symbol likely representing how someone will come and lead the ancient weapons to help bring the dawn. Well, that's it for this video, guys. Please like the video, click subscribe, and maybe even check out one of these other 2 videos that you should probably already see on the screen. Later.